Are you looking at your screen? Well, let me ask you a question, a really simple one. But I want you to answer honestly, how many browser tabs do you have open? 5, 10, 15, maybe 20. If you're smiling wryly and glancing at the stack of tabs, then congratulations. You've just gotten an unwanted ticket. You're not multitasking, you're just acting like one. You're actually slowly draining your energy without even realizing it. And you know what? That's why you're always tired. It's not because you're doing too much. It's because you're jumping between too many things, too fast, too often. Every time you switch from one tab to another, every time you open a new app or switch from one thing to another, you think you're multitasking, but you're actually chipping away at your focus. We've grown up in a world that glorifies busyness. The busier you are, a busy schedule proves you're important. You have to always have something to do to be successful. Sound familiar? But the truth is, being busy doesn't equal being productive. It just wears you out. Slowly and subtly. You're not a computer. Your brain wasn't designed to handle 7 threads at once. It doesn't have virtual RAM. It doesn't have a quick refresh button. And every time you jump from one task to another, even for just 2 seconds, it takes your brain an average of 23 minutes to regain its original focus. What are you doing in those 23 minutes? Ordering a bubble tea? Texting your ex? Scheduling a dentist appointment? Even arguing with a stranger online because they said, pineapple should be on pizza. It sounds funny. But that's the problem. You think you're just switching scenes a little bit, from writing a report to checking Facebook notifications, from listening to a podcast to texting back to work, but every time you switch like that, you throw your focus out the window, and it takes you dozens of minutes to get back to where you started, if you get back at all. That's why you're tired. It's not because you're carrying a giant boulder, it's because you're carrying hundreds of tiny pebbles every hour. You're not being crushed by one big thing. You're being drained by hundreds of small actions, scrolling through TikTok while typing emails, checking messages while on a Zoom call, eating lunch while replying to Slack. Those seemingly multitasking moments are actually draining your brain battery little by little. The exhaustion you're experiencing isn't because you're doing too much. It's because you're constantly switching, jumping from one task to another, from one channel to another, from one emotion to another so fast you can barely breathe. And what's more, you're not alone. The world has, in a very subtle way, turned busy into a badge of honor. The busier you are, the more respectable you are. The less sleep you get, the more successful you are. The less time you have for yourself, the more purposeful you are. But then what, you're running from one task to another like a machine that's always on. But you're not a machine. You're a human. And your brain wasn't designed to switch gears like that. You're not a machine. But you live like you're an operating system that needs to run smoothly at all times. No bugs, no lags, no freezes. So you turn to tools to optimize. Your schedule is full. To-do lists are everywhere, on your phone, on your laptop, in your notebook. Colorful stickers, bright highlighters. It looks cool. It looks productive. It looks like you're in control of your life. But you know what? Maybe those very tools are turning you into a new kind of burnout from sophisticated overload. That is, on the outside, you look like you're in control. There's a place to write everything down, a color to mark every plan. But on the inside, your mind is like a browser with 27 tabs open, all lit up, all buzzing. And you don't know which one to click on first. Because we weren't taught to set limits. We were taught to cram. Another meeting, another small goal, another notification, another deadline, another it won't take much time task. And you feel like you're being squeezed into a bottomless pit, trying to cram more and more in until there's no breathing room left. And what makes you tired isn't a lack of time. It's a lack of space in your mind. To just relax for a moment. To think about one thing. To not respond immediately. To not get this over with and then figure it out. Because you're not a robot, and even robots need to recharge. But you know what? Even when you're not doing anything, you're still tired. Because sometimes the tiredness doesn't come from the action, it comes from your head. The head is always busy, not busy with deadlines, but busy thinking, should I do this first? Should I reply to that message right away? Should I take a break, but will I be considered lazy? Should I clean my desktop? It looks a bit messy. Each of those questions, small and fleeting, but each time it's like a brick on your head. One brick is fine, 10 are bearable. But imagine how many times a day do you ask yourself those trivial questions? Hundreds. And so you fall into a state of extreme fatigue, but no one sees it. It's not easy to name. It's not like the fatigue of running or carrying things. It's a subtle, wearying fatigue, as if your mind is running a series of background apps, never willing to turn off. Your mind is always like a browser full of tabs, not really doing anything clearly, but still constantly processing, worrying, predicting, wondering, and you can't turn it off. And don't dare to turn it off, because you're afraid you'll forget something, because you'll fall behind, because you'll be useless. So you keep running in the background, keep choosing, keep deciding, keep carrying seemingly harmless questions that no one can share with you. And the irony is, the more you have to decide, the more you procrastinate. Not because you're lazy, not because you lack motivation, but because you're too tired. Your mind is like a laptop with too many applications running at once, not shutting down, not restarting, just quietly heating up until everything starts to stutter, lag, and then hang. You see an unanswered email, and instead of typing a few lines, you just skim it. But then it's just there, like a gentle but persistent knock on the door. An invisible reminder of what you haven't done yet. An unread message, nothing much, but you still feel your breath getting heavier every time you open your chat app. A tiny to-do forgotten, then suddenly feels guilty. Each little thing over and over builds up into a nameless pressure. It doesn't knock you down. It doesn't knock you down. It just cuts you gently every day. A small scratch on the skin of your mind. Not enough to scream, but enough to make you never feel at peace. And you try to deny it by doing something else. The spiral begins. You do A to forget B. Then, while doing A, you remember C. And instead of finishing, you open a new tab, jump to C, then go back to B. And so, you don't get anything done, but you still feel busy. Did you notice procrastination isn't stopping? It's doing everything except the most important thing. It is the reaction of a mind too tired to face itself. And that tiredness, no one sees. But you feel it every time you sigh without knowing why. You start to feel guilty, not just because you haven't finished your work, but because you feel like you're not doing it right. Not living up to the image of a hard worker. Not living up to the expectations of your boss, your colleagues, yourself. And that feeling, it's another scratch this time on your self-esteem. And then you decide to take a break. Sure enough, your body is on alert. Your mind is at its limit. You need to off for a bit. So you turn on Netflix, you pull up TikTok, you order bubble tea, you climb into bed, pull up a blanket, and lie down. But why don't you feel better? Because you're not really resting. You're just changing how you spend your energy. Your hands are off work, but your mind is still running. Thinking about tomorrow's deadline, thinking about unsent emails, thinking about, am I being lazy by taking a break right now? You lie on the couch, but your mind is behind the wheel, driving back to the unfinished things and running towards the things to come. And that makes you more tired. Here's a bitter truth. Improper rest can sometimes make you more exhausted than working. You go for a walk, but your mind is still thinking about the afternoon meeting. You sit at a cafe with friends, but your eyes are constantly on your phone. You turn on a movie, but while watching, you scroll through Facebook, text, check your calendar. And when the movie ends, you can't remember the main character's name. You just feel like you just wasted another 2 hours. And the cycle repeats itself. You blame yourself. That I'm really useless. I can't even rest. But you're not useless. You're just not taught how to rest properly. You've lived in a society that makes you believe that rest is a reward. That only the good, the worthy, get to rest. That resting is a sign of weakness, of laziness. So you feel guilty when you stop. So you lie down, your heart still pounding as if someone is chasing you, even though no one is. You are not weak. You have just forgotten the feeling of staying still without asking anyone's permission. Because this society has programmed you very cleverly, if you do nothing, you are wasting your life. If you do not make continuous efforts, you are a laggard. If you rest, you are losing a race that you yourself do not know where the finish line is. So you do not allow yourself to stand still. Every time you stop, a voice in your head says, you should be doing something right now. You just sat down to rest. But inside you feel like you are running away. You are not at ease, but guilty. Guilty for daring to turn off notifications. Guilty for daring to take a nap. Sorry for daring not to reply to messages right away. And over time, your exhaustion doesn't come from work anymore. It comes from having to prove that you're still trying. You force yourself to smile when your mind is exhausted. You say I'm fine when it's clear that everything inside you is a mess. You stay online, still respond, still nod to deadlines, but inside, you're dead, empty, but you keep going. Because you're afraid if you stop, will anyone take you seriously? You're afraid of losing value. You're afraid of being replaced. You're afraid of something very vague, but also very real, that if you don't always show up, you'll disappear. And that's the most dangerous kind of burnout, not explosive. It's abrasive. You don't collapse dramatically. You just drift away, little by little, like a stone that has been dripping water on it for years. No pain, no blood. But one day, you don't recognize who you are anymore. You think you just need to push on a little bit more through this project, through this month, through next week, and then you'll be done. But you know what? If you don't stop and look back, there's nothing left to push on. Exhaustion isn't the feeling of exhaustion at the end of the day. It's a subtle disorientation when you no longer know what makes you happy, what's really worth getting up for in the morning. So, the next time you find yourself with 12 tabs open, studying while surfing the web, eating while watching TikTok, try stopping for a moment. Not to beat yourself up, but to acknowledge a simple fact: you don't have to live like this forever. There's another way to live one where you don't feel like you're racing against your shadow self every day. And you don't have to wait until everything falls apart to make a change. You don't have to wait until your body goes into a red alert or your mind screams for help. You don't have to be hospitalized for exhaustion to be a reason to take a break. Just start paying attention. Pay attention to the times you sigh for no reason. Pay attention to the feeling of emptiness even when everything is running smoothly. Pay attention to the moment you forget why you started. Because self-care isn't a reward for getting things done. It's the bare minimum you need to live without falling apart. Happiness isn't about how much you've achieved. It's about having the energy to enjoy what you've achieved. And sometimes, the first step doesn't have to be a life-changing one. Just close one tab. Close one notification. Turn off the expectation that you have to be strong all the time. Always ready. Always knowing what you're doing. Actually, it's okay not to know. It's okay to be tired. As long as you start listening to yourself a little more. Not to be more perfect, but to be less exhausted. Because you weren't born to be an anxiety machine. You're a human being with limits, with emotions, and with the right to rest.